Welcome, everybody. This is the 10th Sustainable Landscapes webinar. Today we talk about participatory processes in landscape transformations. And sustainable landscapes obviously is heavily involved in transformations of landscape because, well, there's many challenges in accommodating let's say the agricultural transformations, energy transformations, many things happening in the landscapes. We need not discuss them at this moment. But today we have two very interesting speakers about how to actually design and realize these processes of change. And we have Martinus Spoelstra from the Land Registry, the Kadaster. And we have Terry van Dijk, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Spatial Sciences in Planning and Design. And they will take us along in the practice and the theory about community-based processes of land reparcelling. So shifting ownership of lands to make the landscape better. And the Kadaster is very experienced in that, and Martinus Spoelstra is also very experienced in that, both in the more traditional way of doing it and in the community-based approach. And Martinus will share some of his experience with Overschild, how they went in that community-based process. And it's also interesting to notice that the Kadaster is co-financing a PhD position, which is now in the process of being of attracting candidates. So there's also a longer-term cooperation between Terry van Dijk and the Kadaster. And this has also been fueled partly by the Sustainable Landscapes activities, because it was also part of the let's say the PhD proposal and the call to look at sustainable landscapes. So this webinar is interesting from more perspective. It's also part of our thinking fundamentally about these processes, and we will in this PhD proposal there will also be cooperation around projects of the Kadaster to work transdisciplinary actually. So it's also I think in that respect an interesting webinar to see how this transdisciplinary work of our group can work. So we will start with Martinus Spoelstra, and then we will go to Terry van Dijk. Martinus, you've been working quite a while with the Kadaster, or what is?
Now I think it's 3.5 years now.
Okay.
After my master's studies infrastructural and environmental and infrastructural planning in Groningen, I moved to Germany to work there in doing consulting work in spatial planning, and then we moved back in 2018 to Groningen. So now I'm working at Kadaster a few years already.
Okay. And you were with the Faculty of Spatial Science. What was your master thesis on? With whom did you work in our faculty?
I was the special one. The topic was coastal zone management on the Wadden Islands, and my supervisor was Ab Grootjans from the Faculty of Science
and Engineering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was one of the few. Okay. Yeah, I was one of the few not really writing the thesis at the faculty itself. So.
Oh, you were multidisciplinary at that point already. So that's good. You're now also in a multidisciplinary setting, so you can feel at home. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, Martinus, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. So I will just start sharing my screen. It's a PowerPoint, so I hope you see the presentation screen now.
Yes, sure. I see it clearly, yes.
Okay. If it's possible to move. Yeah, there is. Okay, so so I work at Kadaster doing the more traditional land consolidation by law projects, processes, which take sometimes 8, 10, maybe even more years. So the longer processes, but we also have some very interesting smaller projects, smaller scale projects, which also have a shorter duration. So to present you one of the cases, these are perfect for the time we have this lunch break. So let's move to Overschild. Overschild is a village in the province of Groningen, and I have to click here. Yeah. So here, Overschild is located. If you face Martini Tower from the south, it's at your right hand. Quite central in the province of Groningen. Also quite central in the natural gas field, Slochteren. That's how it's called. And Overschild is one of the villages most damaged by earthquakes. So I made a little collage collection of some pictures. The natural gas extraction started in the 60s, and well, some decades later, damages occurred by caused by earthquakes. So also good to mention here, I think most people in the Netherlands already saw this flag, some kind of protest flag. It's the province of Groningen flag with this seismologic line there. So it's some kind of protest flag to show that they are against the natural gas extraction, because it's causing a lot of damage and problems. So this is how the village looks from above. It's a cross-formed shaped village, and we are doing now a few projects here in some of the streets. Few years ago we started. Last year we did a part of one street, and my colleague is now having some conversations in another street. So a little bit of history of the last years. What happened in Overschild? It was quite clear around 2015 that Overschild has to be renewed. So most of the buildings had to be demolished and new constructed. Then the inhabitants actually made by a local initiative made an own plan together with the municipality of Midden-Groningen, and then the municipality was already familiar with the work of Kadaster, but not having a really specific question or issue or case. But then, it was quite clear that Kadaster was a good partner to ask for the problems in Overschild. So we were introduced there around 2018, and 2019 we started facilitating in a land readjustment project. So there was a participatory approach was applied. It was a local initiative, so it was a plan of the people in Overschild. So that was, one of the reasons, and because the people there were already had a lot of problems with their houses, with their objects with damage. So to gain local support and commitment for the plans was very important. Trust, of course, and there was a local initiative, so it was important to find more ideas and perspective from the bottom-up idea. Kadaster was asked for facilitating, our expertise in land registry and land consolidation and readjustment. Most of the time people see us as an objective partner, but otherwise than a municipality or a province. And of course, to take some of the work from the municipality. We have one project leader on the project, so there's one contact person with required expertise, so one person that knows most of the things happening there. Why landowners participate, there are options for increasement of property service of the parcels, and there are some financial advantages when they join the process, like notary fees or cadastral surveying fees, which they sometimes not have to pay. So let's go to one of the cases, one of the projects. The problem in Overschild mainly is with new construction of houses, that the old style shape of the parcels is quite narrow and not wide enough to new build in line with the construction regulations guidelines of today. So you see here in this example in Overschild, you see some of the parcels here that are quite narrow, so it's hard to build a new house there today. These are not the house numbers, so you cannot find the houses by these numbers. The thing that happened in the conversations we had with the landowners was that they were looking together, they were looking for solutions, but eye-openers, well, one of the main eye-openers was that we start moving boundaries of their properties and show them that if you move one boundary, you take one landowner out. In some conversation, people said, well, maybe we want to move to another place somewhere, so away from here. So the parcel was going to be, well, free or for sale. What if you sell it to your neighbor partly, and the other part to your other neighbor, and the neighbor at the other side of the other neighbor is also moving his boundary, and with this kind of chain reaction, you see that all parcels could move their boundaries a bit. I took too many animations in here. So in the end, you see that, well, most of the parcels were not that narrow anymore. So you can reconstruct your house. What happened? I will. Oh, there's one more. Yeah. So here's before and after, and some of the parcels didn't change their boundaries. 9, 10, 11, and the reason for that was actually that number 9 or 10 or both of them, not sure anymore, they already made construction plans. So there was already a plan for where exactly and how their new home would look like and how to construct it. So yeah, they already made some investments, so they were not so happy with moving boundaries, so they just stayed there. So in that case, our timing was not perfect. Would have been better if we were there a year before, maybe. And you see that after number 2 and 6, they moved. In the end, 6 actually stayed and sold his property. So this case only made something brought something for number 1 and 3 and 4 and 5. So it didn't work out that well, but partly we came to a solution. So a little bit of administration in this solution. So before and after surveys, and the difference, so some moved out, they got in minus for 100%, some got some new property. So I already told you it didn't work out because the timing was not perfect. Well, and it worked actually out because there was a need for some of the inhabitants, landowners, and there was an opportunity in this process. So this is one of the examples. There are a few more streets where we did similar things, and now there's one of the streets in the south. I think it was. My colleague is now having conversations there. You see that we notice that the people have a lot of ideas, inhabitants, from the local initiative, and we have a lot of expertise. The trick, I think, is how to bring this together. So you need good facilitating skills, I think. You need to know how you're having a conversation with landowners to exactly know where the solution will be, and if they are ready for a solution. So it's and how to bring different conversations you're having, how to bring the outcomes together in one plan. I'm almost done. Just a few photos from last month, 2 months ago already. You see the streets of Overschild. You see new construction. You see no construction. So all types are there. These are some new homes. So at the edge of the village, they also bit expanding the village there.
These are different homes, right? From
yeah.
Street. Yeah.
Somebody who have his mailbox still at the demolition site. So a nice example of not new construction, maybe later. New construction, a new home. Yeah, so all types. This is the last picture. So yeah, there we see the protest flag.
Yeah, really gone.
Yeah.
Wear and tear.
A little insight in our work there. Just a small example. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Martinus, for your insightful presentation. How in practice you move with this, let's say, disaster area where huge things have to happen. How did budget play a role? If you say, well, 2 people left, they sold a property, did then the municipality buy these properties and sold it again to the others, or how does this work financially? And because these are big things, right, which are perhaps not, well, they're only possible in this area, I think, or how does this work?
There is money from the government, and it was in the news already also last year, I guess, that the village, specifically Overschild, was divided in different batches. So one of the group of landowners, one part of the village, could new construct last year and got financial finances for it. One other was said that they could new construct this year, and a group was didn't got any information yet. So they made a division within the village, and it caused also some of the social issues there, because people didn't want to talk to their neighbors anymore about new construction, because the neighbor said, yeah, we are going to new construct next year. What about you? Well, we haven't heard anything. So, yeah, so new solutions or opportunities also cause new issues and problems sometimes. But how it's financed when their property is going to grow, I'm actually not sure how this is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I could ask my colleague and
no, but it's okay. It's
inform
okay.
you about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you, Martinez. I think we it's nice to start with this practical how things are working out in practice with this area. Now, Teddy, could you take it on from here and reflect on it with more?
Yes, I would be honored. Do you see my front slide?
Yes, I do.
Good. So the case that was presented by Martinez is, as he at the end already said, the interesting thing is an area, a landscape, a village might bump into a problem. And people are confident talking about problems. The earthquakes, yes, they are a problem. The cracks in the houses, yes, they are a problem. And maybe also windmills are a problem, or, nitrogen is a problem. And yeah, sure. And then the question is, what next? What now? We need to transform this landscape, but how exactly? What is possible? What works? And what is the best option? And who generates these options? Because in almost all of the cases these days, the old model of the expert saying, hey, I know exactly what you need, guys. And these politicians defending those choices, the proposal being parachuted into a community. We all know that only generates rejection and sabotage and a lot of lawsuits. So we've seen that in a lot of windmill cases, in a lot of biogas, biomass, and incineration plant cases, when from outside the area, one proposal is invented and pushed onto that area and kind of pushed through their throat that's not working. And with sustainable landscapes being this community of people that understand landscape, that understand the ecology, the history, the soil conditions, also the social impacts and how communities work. We all know pieces of how landscapes work in a physical, social, economic sense. Then we also want to know, how do you get a landscape transformation on the road? Because, science is mostly describing what is. But landscapes are very much about what should be next. And that's in itself not a scientific product mostly, but we can apply science on analyzing these processes between decision makers and people. And of course, there's communicative action, there's collaborative planning, there's participatory. So I put the word participatory in the session, but it's not so simple, because how do you participate? Some governments just say to the people, you say what you want. That doesn't work. In the case of Overschild, without the Kadaster, without that information, without that expertise of reparcelling stuff, without the legal frames that help you do this, they would not have had this upgrade. The audience needs to be educated about possibilities, and of course the audience can also participate in generating these possibilities. And I'd like to show you a few ways that are found in practice to help communities do this, discover what could come next. And politicians are always very hesitant to dream too much because they have this real responsibility. And citizens are also sometimes reluctant to dream too much because they are so attached to what they know as home. And they have difficulty seeing these visions about what could be. The point here is we as scientists know. And there's this great model of Janne-Marie de Jonge. She discerns theory about, how things work. We have knowledge about how to make things. But the judgment on what is wise to do, this situational judgment, that's the essence of politics, of spatial planning. And I'm often very worried in a lot of cases that a solution, it's narrowed down too quickly. And it becomes interesting when we pose the question, what are all the options we would have? Which one is really best? Often we're presented with, like the Southern Ring Road in Groningen, Rijkswaterstaat provided just like 5 options and pretended these were the only ones. Of course, they aren't the only ones. What are all the options and which one is best? And then on process, who should be involved in generating these options and assessing these options and choosing the preferred alternative? Who should be involved? What kind of knowledge do you use in generating this and assessing them? What options are really on the table after a while? And who makes the choice which is the most fitting option? And then this model of one proposal parachuted onto the community is replaced by a dialogue where the experts, they gradually become residents because they understand more and more about the place. And the residents gradually become experts because they are in a conversation about what would be possible, what would be wise. And then you get this twisty road of in-between sketches and solutions and proposals, and in the end you arrive on a joint preferred alternative. And yes, then politicians will say, let's get this done. But they, in the beginning, are smaller on the background and just invite people into this discussion. And how it works in practice is that, let's say you have a traffic problem in a village. Then there's a whole tree of things that could be possible. First of all, you choose whether to act or not. But let's say we all feel something needs to be done. Then there's a rough division in closing down this entire road, upgrading the existing road, making a bypass around the village, or maybe building a flyover, taking the road across the village. I don't know. But these are the main big choices. And under these choices, for instance, the upgrading, there's a zillion choices to make in such an upgrading. And maybe under those, there's a zillion choices too. And the problem of a lot of decision making is that we reject a whole part of this fan, of this decision tree, and just talk about that one thing that a certain government thought was smart. And maybe we try to replace it by this one thing that the residents think are smart. But are we really exploring the entire range of possibilities that could be taken? Well, there's a few interesting practices that really use this divergence, creating a lot of possible choices, not saying they're all perfect, not saying they're all wise, just let it come, let it go wide, and only then converge. And then you can choose from all the options you have instead of someone else already converging for that community and saying, hey, we know what to do, and then you get this protest kind of dynamics. So there's 5 tools I want to mention here that are used in practice. There's much more, but I'm using a few here that I know personally from practice. De omgevingswijzer, the environmental scan, was used, for instance, in the village of Het Harde. And at the time, they had this traffic problem, and the first thought was a bypass. But the province was so smart to say, hey, let's look at all the options, and let's review these options in a much more complete way than just, do we like it? Because that's not a criterion. We replace it by this scan saying, would it be good for the planet? Would it be good for energy use? Would it be good for nature? Would it be good for a lot of facets of the planet? And then for people, would it be good for the people? Would it be good for health? Would it be good for sound? Would it be aesthetically pleasing? And then also for the businesses, like would it be good for the local commerce? And each option was ranked on this diagram. And in the end, the bypass option that the province had offered, the people weren't necessarily against it. It seemed as if they would talk about the details of the bypass. But when they reviewed and took this tool to do the review, they came to the conclusion that taking all this traffic totally outside the village, it would be very harmful for local businesses. And because of this, the village together agreed not to do the bypass and upgrade this village road that is still a pain in the ass, but at least they made a conscious choice saying, but it's good for business because a lot of people just go off the road for a moment to buy bread or go to the supermarket or a garden center that's along this road. Let's keep that traffic here because the traffic here also has benefits. And I find it interesting that this process led to a radical different solution than the conventional process of the experts saying, hey, you need a bypass and this is the best one, and then fight over it. That's not what we should want. We should want this divergence and this collective reviewing of possibilities. That also happened with a new tunnel near Rotterdam. Rotterdam, this is the Europort, this industrial site. This is the city of Rotterdam, and they wanted to have an extra connection to the Europort site. And they were puzzling with multiple routes of this new road, and one of the things was that a big highway junction would need to be built somewhere. And instead of the Rijkswaterstaat engineer saying what is best, they invited the people. Not only to ask them, do you like it, do you want it? No, it's gonna come. But let's talk about how to make that as livable as possible for you. And some people in the discussion said, can't you make this highway junction not with viaducts above ground, but put these flyovers as fly-unders, as little tunnels within this highway junction? And the engineers first thought this is insane, but they started calculating, and for this noise impact, actually, it was great to put this highway junction in deepened trenches instead of heightened embankments and heightened viaducts. So that's suddenly made it possible to put the highway junction somewhere else, and that made it possible to choose a route that was much less damaging to the landscape and to people. So inviting these people into the discussion of what would be wise to do gave way to a whole different solution, and currently it's being built on a different place than the experts originally thought. And these were done in very explicit sketching sessions where the whole community was invited to think along. And they were genuine, they were sincere about being open to new ideas of the people. And then again, the process gave way to the insight, the realization that there was an alternative to what was initially proposed. Even more hysterical, in Copenhagen, there were a few problematic squares. And the city of Copenhagen had budget for designers to make these squares. And they came up with, green lawns and trees and stuff, because that's how Western European architects make parks and squares. But they changed the process. They said to the people living around the square, you get this budget, you get this designer, you are the client of this designer, you together make anything you want. And with a very big Arabian community around this square, the people didn't want grass. The people didn't want trees. They wanted pavement to do skateboarding and to do cycling and to meet and sit. And so they turned this square into this hysterical asphalt square that you see in a lot of car commercials, by the way. And another square turned totally red. So they also paved it all the way, and they put in also fountains and barbecues, and that's what you get when you really give the steering wheel to the community. Again, a process choice that gives way to a whole different landscape, an urban landscape in this case. Also a great story, I can tell you much more, but just very short. A Frisian village got a highway upgrade next to it. The road agency went to the village and said, the highway upgrade is going to come, guys, but let's talk about how to make this as pleasant as possible. One villager said, we used to have a harbor in our village, and the road got in the way, and the harbor is gone for a while already. But this project leader took every suggestion home to the office. And they looked into the possibility of recreating the harbor. And the coincidence was that there was a culvert underneath that road that would be necessary for drainage purpose anyway. And they said, if we upgrade also this culvert, if we make it bigger, then maybe barges would be able to go through. And then pleasure boats would be able to reach the village again. And you can see it on Google, on Omroep Friesland. There was a news item opening this new canal and reconnecting the village of Marsum to the recreational waterways. That was an opportunity so easily wasted. It was so easy to overlook it and say, oh yeah, that's, the harbor, that's not going to happen anymore. They will not look into it. But they looked into everything. And the harbor turned out to be a viable, feasible alternative. And it was built, it was realized, and it gave Marsum a new recreational economic life. Again, a process choice, a seemingly small process choice that makes a completely different landscape transition than would otherwise have happened with a different process. And lastly, games. Also Kadaster, you see the logo here, simulation games. That's also a way to have a dialogue with the experts and the residents, because they're both necessary. Don't just say the residents will have to make up their mind. It's not so simple. You need the experts as well. You need facilitation. And a simulation can be such a way. And the Kadaster has been puzzling with shop owners in Bodegraven and in Assen. That's what I happen to know of, but probably in a lot of places too. About, hey, could we relocate these shops in a way that it becomes more appealing to the audience? And when we switch buildings between each other, we could create a more viable city center. And in some cities, that really was an eye-opener for all involved, that totally a new life of that city center was possible just in the existing buildings. You consolidate the viable shops in a very smart way. So just a few ways to do a review of potentialities of a place. And that's so vital in all these topics that Frans mentioned, the energy, the food production, climate adaptation. You need to scan the future on possible ways to deal with this future. And I put these in a table. These all differ in who defines the problem really. Often the government says, hey guys, we are gonna, in this case of Marsum, the government says we're gonna upgrade that highway. That's just gonna happen because it's a problem otherwise. And then the government also generated some responses, but the residents assessed them and infused it with new ideas. And these parks in Copenhagen, the residents were even the problem definers. They defined what needed to happen to that square or that park. Consultants advised them, hey, you might do this. The residents said, yes, let's take this one. We really would be very happy with this one. And then in the end, even the residents decided on the actual investment. And there's all kinds of nuances. But these stages, what's exactly the problem down here? What would be alternative ways to respond to that problem? How do we rank these alternative responses from attractive to not so attractive? And who makes the choice? This is the preferred alternative. This will be built. There's nuances, but in every step, you must think through who is involved there, who's in charge there, and in what way will we interact in exploring those possible futures. And then you really have a dialogue where, yes, politicians, they still have a role. Yes, experts, they still have a role. And residents are on an equal basis in a dialogue about what is, what could be, and what should be. So, as a bottom line, when we want to make good choices for the sustainable landscapes of tomorrow, we need expert knowledge about history, about ecology, about soil, about agriculture, yes. But in the end, we must make judgments on what is smart to do. We cannot leave that in the experts only. Designers, decision makers, and stakeholders, they are all part of that dialogue, but they should discuss as equals. And we shouldn't put designers down or decision makers down. They're all equal. And then let them talk about the situation, not fight each other, not talk about the problem per se, but what is. And generate this rich array of also the most unlikely options, like in Overschild, tearing down a whole street and rebuilding them with adapted parcels. Nobody thought of that before. But when the money came to rebuild these older houses, this opportunity opens up. You have to help communities realize what options exist. And also decision makers must be open, basically to all options. They shouldn't say too soon, oh, this is not, according to the policy. No, let's just let them come. Let's just talk about them. And it also needs designers who understand the institutional, understand how politics works, how laws work. And then we as researchers, I think it's good within this network too to keep talking about processes that lead to these landscapes. Because with our knowledge, we can ourselves envisage great options, but they won't happen when the process isn't accommodating or conducive to this. We might also think through more how research outcomes could be infused in that kind of future exploration processes, and also discover how then this process would enrich decisions and save us from buying too quickly into mediocre options. And that's what the CASAS research team at the Faculty of Spatial Planning is trying to work at. We have spatial analysts from all kinds of sorts, and we have designers in all kinds of degrees that are working together to make our faculty motto reality, making places better together. That's what we go for. Amen. Back to you, Frans.
Thank you, Terry. It was a very nice presentation, I think. Very important for our group too, to talk about processes. And I think it was very deep digging and inspiring to hear. And especially, well, if we combine it with Martinus' talk, Martinus Spoelstra on Overschild case, but you broadened it up to many more cases. And I think you touch upon a very nice subject too in this era where we struggle a lot with participation because we see the negative sides of participation. Let's say the populist tendencies and the disdain for experts and even politicians. And I think you sort of also sketched a nice sort of solid future if we design or step in the process in a more informed and way and having correct expectations. I think it might, well, it's sort of a hopeful future.